Is the city afraid that they will go away eventually?
We're not afraid of anything, no. I was born there, and we've got a picture here somewhere that shows that. That was a community before the Trop was there. So I don't fear going back to what it was originally. That's the whole reason there's an equitable development perspective here. So we were a community before baseball, we'll be one after baseball, and we still have a shot if we have an ownership who agrees with our values to make that happen. It obviously is not going to happen with this ownership group.
And to that point, Mayor, are you hopeful that there will be a new ownership group for the Rays?
Look, this plan I thought was the right plan, and that's why I advocated for it. That's why we, again, when I came into office, Mayor Kreisman had already selected Midtown. He went through a good process to do that. The Rays had half the development rights through 2027. Those rights will come back to the city. And so I am very comfortable where we are now. We've done the right things. I've always said our city's greatness doesn't depend solely on baseball. I'd love to have them stay, but we're going to move forward regardless.
So is that more modest development deal, the single or the double that you talked about? What
Yeah.
does that look like?
I'm not going to get into details until we are actually terminated, and then we'll talk more about it.
Mayor, there have been voices both locally and reportedly at the MLB level calling on Stu Sternberg to sell the Rays. What is your stance on whether or not he should sell?
My stance is I support the Heinz Rays proposal. I thought it was the best for the city. For some reason, after signing the agreements, the Rays have gone back on it with no really credible explanation. So if it takes another owner to make that happen, I'd be supportive of it. But that owner needs to understand the city and our priorities and the history of the historic gas plant.
Has he given you any indication as to whether he's interested in selling this team?
We haven't had that specific conversation.
He has not said to you, let me ask it the other way. Has he said to you, I'm going to be the owner of this team for a long time?
He hasn't said that either.
Mayor, you're being a real gentleman about the whole situation, but there is an enormous amount of taxpayer dollars that went into this whole agreement. So much staff time, so much city time.
Yeah.
One, is there any legal ramification that you can take to hold them accountable for all the amount of time and effort that went into this plan? And two, if there's not, is there something that you would say to the taxpayers about all the work that's gone into this, that they
I wouldn't take anything off the table. You know, this is pretty fresh, and we'd have to look at all our options. But you know, the way that we conducted ourselves throughout this process was really set the standard, and it was thousands of hours of work. Our team was here 7 days a week, through holidays, through personal and family losses. I can't explain to you how much work our city staff put into this. Same thing for county staff, for the stadium piece of it. So yeah, there's a tremendous cost for us to get to it, but it was to get to bringing a solution to a 40-year issue that has vexed our community and a $6.5 billion impact over 30 years. It was well worth that investment, but that's one of the reasons why I say I wouldn't consider working on any kind of reset with Stu, because we've spent an incredible amount of resources to get to this point. This is the agreement that we all agreed to, and now for these unspecified cost overruns, that's being used as a reason to kill the deal. I'm not going to play that game again.
Mayor, would you consider extending their lease at the Trop? Well, that wouldn't necessarily be like renegotiating the entire redevelopment deal, but that would.
We're going to have to look at everything.
Close in time.
We have to look at everything, Mark, but again, this community has waited for 40 years to get the promises, the jobs, the economic development coming out of that development. I don't want to extend it under that same Trop and 60 acres of asphalt model going forward. I want those benefits, the housing, the jobs, the economic opportunity to start benefiting this community.
Could you start, even if you didn't renegotiate the entire deal, could you start developing certain parcels while also extending the Rays at the Trop?
That is certainly a track, and we're looking at a number of options, but I don't want to talk about, at this point, you know, this notion of a 10 or 15-year extension at the Trop at this point. We need to get the termination. If they're going in that direction, make sure that is, you know, all the boxes are checked there, and then we'll talk with the council and with the community about the paths forward that we've identified.
Mayor, where does this leave Heinz? Heinz is part of this package deal, right? And if this falls forward, they would have to reapply then for another RFP?
If we go that route,
Would you consider working with Heinz again?
Look, I'll just tell you personally, and you know, Rob has spent more time with them than I have. I think they've been a good partner. They've always said they need that anchor tenant, and at the time, the Rays checked that box for having that anchor tenant there. And so, to me, Heinz has performed.
Do you worry that this, this saga might scare away big name global developers like Heinz?
From my experience in the last week, no. I think folks are very interested in St. Pete and really can't really believe that the Rays are dropping the ball on this. St. Pete's greatness doesn't depend on that stadium. The development moving from downtown west is happening and it will continue. It's just the form will be different if baseball doesn't remain here.
This might be too in the weeds, but do you think the trop can be fixed by opening day of 2026? And I know you work on that extensively. Is that feasible?
The last projections I heard said it is. Rob, do you have anything more recent?
Yeah, I mean, our team's working well with Major League Baseball and the Rays. We're on track. Anything can happen in a construction project, but we're optimistic about the timeline.
Opening day of 2026?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mayor, when you look back at the press conference, the we're here, all that, and all that optimism that day, is it hard to believe you're sitting here now, where you are?
It's disappointing, but it's not unexpected. Again, I personally experienced when the interstate came through and Granddad had to move his business. I personally experienced when our church had to move from 1400 Fourth for economic expansion that ultimately became the Florida Suncoast Dome. So we've seen those kind of broken promises before. What gives me optimism this time is, I've called this like a marriage. It's better to get out of a bad engagement than a bad marriage. And so if this is the kind of behavior we're seeing after 6 months, I'd rather see it now before we're locked in than to have it 6 years or 16 years into the agreement. And so this is not the end of the story. It's not the outcome we wanted, but we are in a good position to move forward for the benefit of our whole community.
Mayor, how much land could the city start developing on that isn't touched by parking?
I can't give you the specifics, and those stickies were there way before, you've seen them before, so those aren't the parcels. That just helps me with delineating. But we are looking at that. We've had conversations about that internally. When the time is right, we will talk about what we can do.
What's the timeline? When will we hear more about those things?
Well, March
Honestly,
31st, yeah. And then, I am very conservative at this point in dealing with the Rays. I need to see that that the termination is complete before we take those steps.
And then you would issue a new RFP?
Not necessarily. We'll let you know what we're looking at.
How would that work?
We'll let you know when we get there.
Mayor,
Okay.
given the promises that have been broken here and the time that's been spent on this, do you think that the Rays and/or Stu owe the community an apology?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had these personal conversations. The legacy of the historic gas plant, the promises of economic development, the 30,000 jobs. I mean, this was not about just the historic gas plant community. It was about the future of St. Pete and a transformative economic development project moving forward. And to have us, look, the chairman and I and others took a little bit of heat bringing this forward as elected officials. But we saw, he was elected without opposition. You got to get opposition next time. You got to stay in training. And Deborah Fix Sanders also won by a huge margin. And as I've been elected 6 times. I trust the people to understand leadership when they see it. And they knew why we were doing this and why we structured it that way. And so, it was supported by the community. This community came forward in St. Pete and across Tampa Bay, if you look at the list of organizations that supported this, because they knew this was a way to not only keep baseball in St. Petersburg and in Tampa Bay, but to have such a great economic driver. There was workforce in it. We were going to train folks for the jobs that were coming, honor those 40-year promises. And you tell me why that's not going forward.
Mayor,
They need to explain that.
please.
Yeah.
I have a letter here that apparently Blake Partners, investment partners sent to you and members of the city council, offering to buy the land for $260 million. Is that something you're considering? Are you
What's the date of
considering
the
any
letter?
offers? Sorry?
What's the date?
March 13th, today.
Today, okay.
That
so-
came in today, Mayor. You know,
Okay.
we receive unsolicited proposals all the time.
We do, and that's to, I think, Mark, did you ask a question? Somebody asked if there's interest, or if folks are still interested in St. Pete. That's a good example. Folks, yeah, there'll be a lot of interest. So I haven't seen that particular letter, but we're gonna have options going forward.
Are you considering selling the land to a developer?
I haven't read that. We've got a number of options. But again, the 21 principles that were in our RFP still stand. We still want the housing, the jobs, all those benefits.
So Mayor, is this, kind of like a single or double like you were describing? You would be able to break ground on some land around the trop, and then, the Rays, there's a scenario, I guess, where the Rays would stay there until the trop's completed, right, 2027, 2028. And then after that, a new ownership group maybe could come into the fray by that point, and potentially there could still be
So
a
the option that
ballpark
keeps
on that
baseball
land.
here is that option. A new ownership group emerges relatively quickly. We can have conversations about adopting a plan that has a similar design as the Heinz Rays plan. The other option is that the Rays play out their 2028 commitment here, and then we develop all the land without baseball. There are a number of options, but we're going to be prepared.
Is your preference to keep a baseball team here, like under new ownership then?
Under the right agreement and circumstances, yeah, but I've always said, we don't want to keep baseball at any cost, right? It's got to be reasonable. And so, you can't make an agreement and then come in and ask for $300 million more based on nothing and expect us to agree to that. We're just not going to do that.
You said your phone call with Stu was brief. Can
Yeah.
you elaborate at all on the tone of it? What he
The
said?
tone was cordial. It was not unexpected. I mean, again, if you're getting married and you're seeing this kind of behavior in the engagement, you're not surprised by it. And again, it's not the first time there was, looking in Hillsborough for 3 years, looking in Ybor, Montreal split, kind of new, right? So it was a cordial conversation. I think he understands where I am and I understand where he's coming from.
Mayor, have you spoken to the Major League Baseball Commission about this? And do you have confidence in his public statements that he would like the Rays
I do.
to remain in this market?
I do. We've had several conversations.
Today?
Not today,
Okay.
with Commissioner Manfred. My chief of staff is in more frequent contact with his office. They support fully the plan that we put together. They want to stay in Tampa Bay. They know where you're going to go. Nashville, I mean, we are a very good television market for them. We've got public funding. We've got a growing Tampa Bay metro. I believe the commissioner is supportive of our plan.
Mayor, would it almost make sense at this point? I believe you have to, do reasonable efforts to fix the trop, right? Would it make sense to slow roll that process at this point?
The reason that we initially wanted the trop repaired before the Rays had council reverse their vote by saying that we couldn't get a commission vote, which we did get later, was I didn't want to have the Rays playing out west for 3 years, which is one of the things they were talking about. Plus, we're obligated to do that. Now, we did have conversations about other options that we can negotiate, but to me, we need to go ahead, fulfill our obligation. That gives us till 2028, hopefully way before that, if there's a new owner. Meanwhile, there are other parts of that we're going to look at developing.
5 minutes left.
For baseball to continue in St. Pete, would the Rays need to sell relatively quickly?
I need to have conversations with our team and with the chair and with our county folks. I've always, in my mind, said it needs to happen, the next 1 or 2 years to give us some certainty going forward. I wish it would happen sooner than that. But at some point, we are going to stop holding up the development of those 86 acres for the benefit of the community. It's been 40 years. It's been long enough.
Previously, Mayor, when we had spoken about the shortfall that the Rays allegedly have, there was some talk of introducing them to some private partnerships that might be able to help with that funding gap. Were those introductions made, and do you know what the progress of those were? I mean,
We've had a lot of conversations with the Rays. I couldn't tell you today what the number is. I've asked repeatedly, what is the number? What is the gap? We use a term, we're solving for X. Well, we don't know what X is. There was no obligation for the county to approve the bonds at the point the Rays talked about. There are so many problems that I have with that argument. Again, we didn't know that that was a drop dead date, or we would have been there. We go to Clearwater for all the meetings that we need to show up and express our support for a position. So, I think we are in a good position. Really the next step is up to Stu and to Major League Baseball.
Were there private businesses that came to the table and said, hey, we'll help in, we'll pitch in whatever it costs to keep the Rays here?
I think there's a lot of interest from folks around the community who want to help, but if you don't know what the gap is, how can you really help solve it?
Mayor, you're the 6th mayor on either side of Tampa Bay to negotiate with the Rays in pursuit of a new stadium. Were you warned that relations would sour?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think you could just do it differently?
Yeah, Mayor Baker chewed my ear off at the Firestone Grand Prix in a very friendly way, kind of saying, yeah, I told you, but you're seeing it. I really thought we had it. We had everything in writing. We had the agreements. It was mutually beneficial. But this reflects what past mayors have conveyed to me, and that's unfortunate.
What do you say to Mayor Jane Castor, who said, as long as it makes sense for our taxpayers, we're willing to maybe dust off our proposal?
Jane's a good friend. I saw her somewhere this week. I think we were over in Tampa at Leadership Florida together. Again, she's had discussions with them. The whole Ebor conversation, they've had it. But I think she ended her tweet by saying it has to make sense for the public. And look, we've always said we want to keep baseball in Tampa Bay. I've also said this was our last best at bat, our best swing. We did everything we needed to do, and if they end up working out something in Tampa, life will go on here in St. Pete. We put our very best effort on the table.
Have you talked to Commissioner Manfred about possibly getting another team if Stu decides to relocate?
No.
There's nothing contractually that would keep the Rays from speaking to Tampa or any other location for 2029 and beyond?
So at the moment, as Ms. Wright explained, there is no official termination, so they're still under the new non-relocation agreement. So at this moment, no, they couldn't. But once there's an official termination, or we pass March 31st, they could talk to another community about playing there after the end of the current lease agreement.
Is there any mechanism by which they can get any of this land to develop?
I mean, currently, right now, they have some options. That's why we're expecting a termination, and that's why that's important for us. One reason, and the March 31st date is important for us.
Would the city fight to stop that from happening?
Well, through discussions with them at this point, we don't expect that to happen. But
Have they pulled out any land yet at this point?
I'm sorry.
Have they taken over ownership of any of the land?
No.
Okay.
Is it disappointing that, you said several times that this was not unexpected. Is it disappointing that it's March, whatever day is, and you're getting the news now when it appears that they had made this choice back in November?
Yeah, I think I said in my statement it's disappointing but not unexpected. And Commissioner Scott and others have conveyed some conversations that they had with the Rays before that commission vote. So the whole thing is, I guess you have to understand the perspective of a person. Stu's priority is not the history or legacy of the gas plant or the economic development of the city of St. Pete or the jobs or any of that. He's got a different set of priorities. So I guess if you understand the nature of a person, a business person, an elected official, then you kind of understand their perspective. It's just not his priority. And I've had those conversations. Look, this is about generations going forward having that impact. And that's just not what they're focused on.
Last question.
You frequently compare, the situation to a relationship, right? And you made a great point, an analogy about seeing the red flag, so to speak. But also a lot of times in relationships, people go through a rough patch and then they break up and then they realize that they, they want to work things out. Do you see anything like that happening?
Yeah, how many times do you do that? I mentioned Ybor,
Depends on who you are.
Ybor, Montreal, looking in Hillsborough for 3 years. I mean, at some point, it's probably best to separate.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for,
Not, thank
Sorry,
you
put it all right?
for not giving me the scooter truck.
I'll look at it in a
Yeah.
I talked to her after. I said, if it were me,
Mayor.
so what do you want to do? Because I appreciate it. Thank you, Sam.
Hopefully that was right now, there is still a deal. Hopefully, that was helpful. Yeah.
I'm really only like, about you,